Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today's episode is absolutely fascinating. It's kind of about French wine, but it's also not really about French wine. This is really an episode about the future of wine and, more importantly, who it's actually being built for.
Our guest today is Antonin Bonnet, co-founder of Pierre Antonin, which is a fast-growing French wine brand that identified a very specific gap in the market, which was natural wine at the $15 to $20 price point. If you've spent time drinking these types of natural wines over the past decade, you've probably noticed something, which is these wines are often compelling, but they're also pricey at $35 or more a bottle, and that creates a barrier to entry. Antonin and his co-founder Pierre saw that gap, and they went all in on solving it.
And here's where it gets interesting. To make natural wine affordable and profitable, they bet the company on hybrid, so-called resistant grape varieties. Hybrids have long been dismissed by much of the wine industry. The narrative has been that these are grapes that are inferior, or that their quality isn't commercially viable, or that they don't belong in quote-unquote serious wine conversations. But Pierre and Antonin decided to test that assumption.
And I'll say this, I tasted through the wines with them at Wine Paris and thoroughly enjoyed them. They're juicy and fresh. These are clean, natural wines with no funkiness. Plus, the sustainability message is not just a line. These wines are fully organic. Pierre and Antonin train local farmers to both grow hybrids and to farm them organically. And then they package the wines into the lightest bottles on the market. Everything from the grapes to the glass to the printed labels come from within 100 kilometers of the winery. These are wines that I would be thrilled to bring to a friend's house and be able to tell that story. And I'm not even their core demographic. Their average consumer is around 26 or 27 years old, so squarely Gen Z or younger millennial. And that audience, they don't really care whether they're drinking vinifera or hybrids. They care about the taste, they care about the price, they care about sustainability, and they care about the narrative.
To that end, hybrids unlock something powerful. These resistant grapes mean dramatically less spraying in the vineyard, lower labor cost, lower input cost, and lower environmental footprint. So sustainability isn't just part of the marketing story, it is an economic enabler, right? It fuels the brand and allows them to hit that $15 to $20 price point and still build a viable business. Antonin says it clearly in this episode, if you want to change the world, your first mission is to be profitable. I love this, right? You can't be values driven if you can't stay in business.
What makes this conversation so relevant for our audience is that it raises a bigger question. Is the wine industry overcomplicating wine for the next generation? While parts of the trade debate appellations and varietal purity, younger consumers are voting with their wallets. They're snapping up everything that Pierre and Antonin can produce. That was about 350,000 bottles last year, and they're targeting 400,000 bottles this year across more than 20 different export markets.
We also cover the tactical side of the business, right? How identifying a white space in pricing became the foundation for Pierre and Antonin, and why PetNat was their entry vehicle. The conversation is very wide-ranging. We cover how landing Trader Joe's became a revenue inflection point, as well as why Instagram collaborations outperform paid ads for reaching young urban consumers. The biggest takeaway is this: onboarding the next generation of wine consumers may require some rethinking of some of the sacred cows of the industry.
So if you're building in wine, or frankly, in any legacy category that's facing generational headwinds, this episode is about meeting younger consumers where they are, not where the industry wishes they were. So this isn't about French tradition. It's about accessible, sustainable wine that young people actually want to drink.
Here's our conversation with Antonin Bonnet of Pierre and Antonin.
And now, a word from our sponsor. If you're developing a new product and want to avoid costly supply chain mistakes, MHW's Brand Arc can take you from idea to finished product, including liquid sourcing, component suppliers, co-packing, forecasting, all of it. It's a smarter way for founders to scale without building a full operations team. Get to market faster and with fewer surprises. Learn more at mhwltd.com. And now, back to the show. Antonin, thank you so much for coming on The Business of Drinks.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start out with a little bit of your background. You trained in Montpellier and spent about 15 years working in wine, including living in New York. What did you see in the U.S. market that made you realize that there was an opportunity to build a different kind of French wine company?
So I started in the U.S. as a salesman, even though my father was a winemaker. My grandfather was also a winemaker, but I was a salesman in the streets of New York City. So everything was tough, everything was complicated. But what I saw and what really impressed me from day one was that American consumers are open to change. They're open to new way of making wines. They don't mind getting out of AOPs and comfort zone when it comes to wine. Of course, you have some great events like the wine experience where it's more traditional. But, going to Brooklyn, going to a bar where the natural wine scene was very intense, where there was a lot of different wines from different companies, from different wineries. Then I realized that a good first market will be the US, because people are not opposed to change. It's quite the opposite.
Well, a lot of French winemakers, they inherit estates and then they follow sort of the traditions that have been handed down. But you went a different route. So what was it that influenced your willingness to experiment and to challenge convention?
Yes, my father, even though he was a winemaker, had no land. He was working for others. He was a flying winemaker, as we say in French, monologue volant. And the idea was that without any land, without any winery, with Pierre, we started from a clean sheet. We could actually build everything ourselves. And in the beginning, it's probably something that wasn't easy, but it also is something that is helping us because there was no limits. We had, as we say, completely free hands, so we could build whatever we wanted. And that's how we got interested in the resistant varietals, so hybrids, or as the German called them, the peewees, but that's all the same thing. We decided that we could start planting and we could start buying grapes following that path.
And so was Pierre and Antonin self-funded or do you bring in outside capital? And how did the funding decisions shape your growth strategy?
So in the beginning, we thought about raising capital, and it was bootstrapped from day one. Pierre started on his own in 2015. Then there was an ongoing conversation from 2015 to 2020. I helped a little bit. I started importing the wines in the United States. So this brought the company some cash to actually grow. The US was and is always the first market for Pierre and Antonin. In the beginning was 80% of the sales. Now it's more like 60%. But it's not because the sales went down. It's because other markets really grew. And it was basically our funding, but this help from the very beginning really helped bring some cash to the company and to start building the growth. So yeah, self-funded entirely, even though a couple of times we thought about bringing other people in, but to this day, nope, it's only us.
Nice, nice. Well, early on, you committed to using hybrids as well as organic farming, native yeast, and eco-conscious packaging. Why was it important to you both to build the company around those pillars?
It's been an ongoing conversation. When Pierre started in 2015, he was making some vitis vinifera, so classic vine plants. And I was interested in organic viticulture, and I was interested in natural winemaking. So that was my beliefs. That's what I was standing for, and I'm still standing for this. And Pierre was interested in resistant varietals. So we kind of combined different opinions and different views, and we started thinking about the three pillars early on. And then the fourth one was eco-conscious packaging. So Pierre Antonin is really based on these four pillars. It took us a couple of years to align on these because Pierre wasn't a big believer in the beginning in natural winemaking, and I had doubts about resistant varietals. So an ongoing conversation and also visiting a lot of different estates from northern Italy, in Jura, in the south of France, in different locations, until, yes, I was convinced that resistant varietals will be part of the future of viticulture. That's a belief that was built, I would say, in between 2017 to 2020. And in 2020, when we joined forces and when Pierre became Pierre Antonin, we decided that slowly and surely we'll get rid of all Vitis vinifera and really focus only on Sauvignon Gris, Cabernet Cortis, all the resistant varietals. And today we have 12 of them. And the cuvées that are made of Vitis vinifera, they're about to be discontinued.
For the hybrid varieties, what is it that they have unlocked for you operationally or from a cost savings?
Well, that's a very good question. From day one, I was ensured they were resistant against powdery mildew and oidium and black rot. So that's something that we wanted to see ourselves. So that's why we started going to see vine growers, because we're vine growers and negociants. So we're also buying grapes on the side to make wines. And, it's getting feedback from wine grower. When someone tells you, yes, it's resistant against oidium. The other one says, yes, it's a resistance against mildew. And then you have a dozen different feedback that, tell you exactly the same thing. Then you start believing. And that's exactly, what you unlocked. The unlock was, okay, not only it is less work in the vineyard, but it's also better for the planet. So it was but if you want to change the world, your first mission is to be profitable. Otherwise, you don't change anything because you're going out of business. And the idea of combining less work in the vineyard, so saving energy, saving labor, saving water, in the end, it's saving money. And at the same time, making wines for, a better planet, because you know that organic viticulture is no use of pesticides, no use of fungicide, no use of herbicides, but you're still spreading some sulfur and copper in the vineyard. And with resistant varietals, you're getting rid of that copper and that sulfur spread. There is no more machine spreading anything in the vineyard, and this is better for the soil. And to my point about profitability, it's also better because you save on labor.
So, as a result of using the hybrid varieties, you're operating outside of the appellation system entirely. And what has that unlocked for you in terms of flexibility and brand building?
So that's one point that was very important from day one. Even though in Montpellier, in my hometown, there's some research about resistant varietals, it's very, very new. The Germans started with the Swiss and some Italians in the 70s, in the 80s, but none of the varietals that we cultivate, none of the varietals that we purchase to make wines really qualified into the AOP or IGP system in the beginning. So we knew that appellations was not part of the equation. And it was okay because we're in between Mallepère and Cabardès in the south of France. And nobody know about these appellations. These appellations are, even for my father, that is a local winemaker, he didn't know these appellations very well. So we said it doesn't matter. The situation would have been different if the estates and we were based in Châteauneuf-du-Pape or in Côte de Baude. Of course, that would have been a different conversation. But where we were in the Aude region near Carcassonne, the cost of land is the cheapest in France, and the region is also the poorest of France. So it's a good place to start a lab, and in a way, a lab in experimenting, planting different varietals. And that's why we could build that collective. So Pierre Antonin doesn't only stand for two winemakers, he also stands for a collective of vine growers that want to plant different varietals and that want to help us in our everyday task of making the resistant varietals more known to the regular consumers and to in our case, younger consumers, because and we'll talk about it later, that's also one of our focus points. Make sure that younger consumers, the Gen Z, and soon the Alpha in the US, you have a little bit of time because they have to turn 21 to drink, but really to be more appealing to them. They don't know what a Pinot Noir is, and a Cabernet Cortis to them is the same as a Pinot Noir. There is no difference. They want to know the story. They want to know what a resistant varietal is and how it affects the winemaking. And I think that that's really important. So to go back to your question, appellations were to us, and I'm saying to us only, were completely irrelevant. And we decided to not pay attention to them. And the beauty is there's a lot of regulations and rules in France already. And at least not sticking to the appellations, then you have a lot of rules that don't apply to you. And that's a big plus.
Well, tell me about the brand and how it's positioned in the marketplace.
So the idea when we started, and, going back to what I said about going to Brooklyn and going to, nice natural wine bars, and the US, especially New York, is really advanced. I thought that they were always very expensive, drinking some famous producers like Nicolas Joly or drinking Marcel Lapierre or Foillard. I mean, it's great wine, but it's always, $35, $40 and above. And our idea was to offer some more affordable natural wines. So that's really what Pierre and Antonin stand for from the beginning. Making wine affordable by the wallet and accessible by the palate, making sure that younger consumers could try a wine with no added sulfites, made with hybrid varietals around, $15 to $20. That was really the key stone of the offer, because no one would never actually try our wines if they were like 30 or 35 dollars on the shelves. They want to have some, they want to take a risk, but calculated risk. They don't know about it. If it's $15, well, I give it a try. If it's 40, then it's a different conversation. So from day one, we knew that we had to be affordable. We knew that we had to offer some value wines. And it's also very good with being bootstrapped, because at the same time, you need to have your production out the winery so you can get paid, instead of keeping wine aging in barrels or aging in tanks. And then you have a problem with cash flow. So from the early days, the idea and the ambition was that by the beginning of the spring, the previous vintage was out the door. And today we're in February 2026, and all the wines that we are selling at the moment, they're 2025. There is no more 2024. And that's very, very important for us. Making sure that we can stay on top of the game, not keeping too much wines. And now, after almost 6 years of making wines together, we're making some cuvée that can age, because we're getting a lot of demand from journalists asking, is there a terroir effect in the resistant varietals? How can resistant varietal age? And the answer to that was, okay, let's keep some wines on the side. And instead of us telling you exactly how they age, how they behave, well, you come yourself, and we have some ideas, but we want you to experiment them, taste them, and tell us what you think. So yeah, from the early days, we knew that the $12 to $20 segment was really the target.
Yeah, yeah. And who is the primary consumer audience for Pierre and Antonin wines in the US?
So based on a couple of information we got from the markets, number of clicks on Vivino's, number of scan of the barcodes, we know that our average consumer is 26, 27 years old. And that's very, very important for us. We're making wines for everyone. I want my 72 years old father as a classic winemaker to like the wines. He's a person that I call him the gatekeeper, because we don't want any flaws in the winemaking. So for me, it's important that we appeal to conventional wine drinkers and we appeal to natural wine drinkers. We don't want to create any dogma. We're not against anything. So the idea is yes, I want everyone to appreciate our wines. But when you look at numbers, the average consumer is under 30, 26, 27, is an urban consumer. So I do not discriminate. When people tell me, who's your consumer? Is your consumer in Asia? Is your consumer in America? Is your consumer in Europe? I would say that in certain neighborhood, they're all the same. Let's take the example of the neighborhood Grünerløkka in Oslo, in Norway. It's the same people that we have in Brooklyn, in Bushwick or Williamsburg. It's the same people you have in the 9th, 10th or 11th arrondissement in Paris, Rive Droite. It's the same people you find in Copenhagen in some of, hipster neighborhood, if you want. People that pay attention to what they drink, how they drink, and the storytelling behind it, and that want to be able to track what we're doing, which is the reason why, because they don't just believe your words. They wanna see what you do. They look at it, and that's why we're keeping the Instagram page really alive, and we kind of explain everything we do and the impact we have, because we're getting a lot of followers these ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, was there an early unlock that really helped the brand grow? Like one account or an operational change that really grew exponential, unlocked big growth?
Yes, there are 3 steps. The first step was the product. The product was the pet nuts, because we're very close to Limoux. So we got some ISO vats, and we got some materials to make sparkling wine. Crément or Blanquette, it's very easy to make pétillant naturel. The pétillant naturel, pet nat, is like a méthode ancestrale, but it's not disgorged, and it's just natural yeast. That's what a pet nat is. So the pet nat has been around for a long time. So the game changer was the pet nat. The market changer was the United States, and the buyer was Trader Joe. So Trader Joe, back in 2022, we started a conversation with the buyer, the main buyer, and then he took on some wines. I think in the beginning was 6,000 cases, went all the way up to 15,000 cases to this day. Every year that we ship of Pétillant Naturel, and under 2 labels that you can find in your local Trader Joe, called Amuse-Bouche. And this was a big step for us, because all of a sudden a major key player, especially in the US, I don't know how many stores they have, but a lot. They have a lot of stores. It's hard to say how many points of sales, because as you know, in the US, not all states can sell wines in grocery stores. So it's hard to know. But it was hundreds of stores that had the wines in the spring of 2022. And that really put us on the map. And every year in 2023 and in 2024, we shipped more, which, means that consumers like the products. And that was a big step, because all of a sudden we doubled the revenue of the company. At the same time, Wine and More also brought some wines. Now we're doing 15 pallets with them a year, which are also pretty good. And then on the East Coast, we work with the Touton family, and from Massachusetts all the way down to Florida, they carry our wines. Different wines, because different channels and different prices and different varietals.
And now a word from our sponsor. Meet Ride, a range of 2-ounce shots designed to help you manage your everyday moments. It's made with science-backed ingredients and free from sugar and calories. Whether you need to energize, get focused, or unwind, you'll find it on Amazon and at select retailers. To learn more and partner with Ride, visit ryde.com. And now, back to the show. Well, walk me through the portfolio. How many SKUs are there, and what are they?
So at the moment, we have 12 wines as part of the core portfolio. We have 2 pet nats. We have actually 1 orange wines, and all the others are still red and white. We also have 1 rosé. This is what we produce under Pierre Antonin. And then when we have major markets, like we just talked about Trader Joe and Total Wine and More, but we could also talk about the monopoly in Quebec or in Sweden, for example. Then we have some additional products. When we make more, then we have a different label. When we need the collective to start working with us, when we have, line with thousands of cases, then we have alternative labels. So 12 as part of the core for independent restaurants and mom and pop shop, I would say. And then another 4 SKUs that we can use for a major key chain of trade, usually like organic supermarkets like Eco Plaza, for example, Trader Joe, and Total Wine and More. And Whole Food, to cite another one. But that's Whole Food is in the pipes.
Yeah, you mentioned the pet nats. Are those the products that are driving most of the growth today? Or which of the SKUs are you finding are really breaking out and resonating the most? And why is it that you think that they're the most popular?
I think there's a real demand for bubbles, sparkling wines across the board. We see that a bit everywhere. So that's really what put us on the map in the United States, because 80% of the market was the US. And among that 80% was pet nuts. So that was really clear, on the side of the consumer. Then in other markets, it's a bit different. For example, orange wine is also a key driver in some specific markets in France. In the United Kingdom, it's also one of the major SKU. But then you have other markets where it's not as popular as it used to be. And one example is Quebec or Ontario in Canada, where these wines are no longer, I mean, they've been flooded with orange wines about 10, 12 years ago. So it's like rosé in the US, like 10 years ago, everyone wanted some rosé from Provence. And now you can see a kickback. People are saying, well, that's enough. But yeah, most of what we sell is sparkling. Most of what we sell, I looked at numbers before our interview today. But when we look at Pierre and Antonin as a whole, that's 60% sparkling wine.
Wow, wow. A lot of producers who are abroad, they have a very hard time securing their first importer to start building distribution in the United States. So, how did you secure your first importer?
Well, the first importer in the United States was Touton. I knew Maxime from my days before working for that major Rhone Valley producer. He was the importer. And at the time I left the company, I told him about my project and I said, now I'll be looking for an importer. And then Maxime Touton said, well, instead of going to see someone that has plenty of natural wines, instead of going to see, I don't know, T. Edwards, instead of going to see Skurnik, instead of going to see people that have a fantastic portfolio with many different natural winemakers. What about me? I have none. And I said, well, but would you be interested in having natural wines? And he said, well, I'll be interested in giving it a try. So, I'm opening to you 11 markets along the East Coast. I'd like to be your importer and wholesaler in these states. What do you think? And I said, well, I never thought about it. I never thought you'd be interested. But if this is something that we can add to your portfolio, I'll be grateful and I'll be happy about that. And that was a conversation we had from day one. I mean, it was in 2020. The first wines from Pierre and Antonin were imported by Touton, and that was in the first wines arrived in New Jersey, I believe, early in 2021. That was quite fast. That was the beginning. And it's interesting because that was his idea. I would have never thought about going to see someone that has, Touton is known for their major Italian portfolio and Bordeaux portfolio. They have a lot of, classic Burgundy wines that I also like very much. But then when you think about natural wine, you don't you don't think about Touton. And that was really something that changed the game from the very beginning. Because, when you talk about the United States, you fill containers pretty quick. It's the major market. Even if we started with 5 SKUs, now we have 6 or 7, but it starts with pallets right away. And then shortly after was containers.
Well, let's talk a little bit about landing that first big national account. So, Trader Joe's, how did that partnership come together?
Well, it was from my days of the buyer that I started talking to is now gone. So I think we can name him, Chris Condit. So when I was working for that Rhone Valley producer for years, I would go to see him and say, hey, what about you add some Côte du Rhône to your assortment? And he was saying, well, I'm not really interested. I have many other Côte d'Or, let's see each other next year. And then the following year, I was like, okay, I have some Côte d'Or and I have some other wines from the Rhone Valley. Would you be interested? And he was saying always the same thing. Well, I don't think I'm interested, but I'll see you next year. And I was working for that company almost 10 years, actually 8 to be precise. And for 8 years, he never bought anything from me. And then in 2020, when I was on my own, I just, send an email and say, look, now I have something to sell, but it's not Côte d'Or anymore. It's resistant vitals, and it's pet nuts, it's organic, and it's no added yeast, no added sulfites. What do you think? I said, well, I'll give it a try. So I sent some samples, and I want to say the rest is history, but no, I sent some samples. He said the samples were great. He said he was interested in trying something. Then a few weeks after he resigned, I think he retired. And I was like, I was a bit sad, but he said, well, don't worry. Someone's taking over, and I kept some samples, and I'm sure I'll be interested. And you know the way it is. In that case, there'll be a gap when someone's taking over. But that's not what happened. The person after actually took over, looked at the samples and said, well, I mean, at Trader Joe's, there's a commission. So you have a bunch of people, different profiles, all tasting the wines together. And the first pet nat was approved, and then the second pet nat was approved. And then at that time, we were very happy about it. And that was a major breakthrough. That was a major breakthrough for us. I remember when he started asking about quantities, and he said, well, we'll need 5,000 or 6,000 cases. I was like, okay, we need to make some phone calls, find some more grapes. But that was really exciting. And that's something that really put us on the map. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs have to do. You have to say, okay, even if I don't know how we're going to solve this problem right now, we're saying yes to the opportunity and we're going to make it happen. So it sounds like there was a lot of sort of scraping it together, making it happen in those early days.
I remember calling Pierre and saying, can we make it? And he said, well, that's about all the sous-vinegries available in the oil region that I know of. So I said, well, then it's possible. And he said, well, the US is always a bit in advance. So buyers like this, they have a plan and they tell you months before they need the wines. So it's not like they need it tomorrow. So yeah, I remember Pierre, that is more on the production side, was making a lot of phone calls. We went to see a lot of different people because he had to be the same vital. He has to be the same terroir, the same soil, the same, it had to be organic as well. So it was exciting because you say yes and then you figure it out. And guess what? We shipped until the last bottle, we shipped everything. The thing is, for the pet nat, it takes a little time because it ferments in bottle. So it's not as easy as, making sparkling wine with a soda stream, or even like making crément or blanquette or champagne, which is something you can control. Making pet nats, you need a lot of space because the fermentation takes about 6 to 8 weeks in bottles, and then you ship them once they're stable. So it takes a bit of organization, but then after landing that market, it was easier to get new players also, because we just talked about the US, but now we work with some major markets also in the UK, some major markets in Germany, and some key players also in France. Finally, took a little more time because French are more conservative. And when it comes to winemaking, I'm just talking about winemaking here. But yeah, landing that major player, and to this day, our relationship with Trader Joe is good, and we've shipped a lot of wines, and we're happy about it. Now we have a third SKU with them, which is a still wine, and we'll see about 2026 how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell me about your channel mix. What does it look like from a retail versus on-premise sort of mix? And then what types of restaurants and bars do you find yourself being served up in?
Yeah, so we just talked about major players where we have specific labels, but the core SKUs of Pierre Antonin, the 12 SKUs that we talked about, the still wines, the pet nat, the orange wine, this is more independent stores. This is more restaurants, more farm to table. There's an app called the Raisin that you keep seeing in the United States. It's big in France, big in Europe. but this is a place essentially where you find farm to table restaurants. And how do you do this? If they have natural wines, usually they pay attention to the food they serve. So that's really an app that early on we decided to be on. I mean, it takes a little bit of organization because they want to check on you on everything. You have to send the analysis, but this is also a good app now to know where we are. You can see the scans in the US now. It's getting bigger and bigger, but in the French market, in Europe in general, this is something that's where we can track the wines. So independent stores a lot, especially for example in New York State, where you have almost, because of the rules of one license per ownership, you don't have many chain stores. So it's a lot of moms and pop shops. It's a lot of farm to table restaurants. It's a lot of places that you can find from Bushwick all the way to Brighton Beach, basically. Brooklyn is one of the major markets. I sell way more in the 4 boroughs around Manhattan than in Manhattan. I mean, Manhattan is not, I mean, now it changes a little bit. You can see some of the wines in the East Village, in the West Village. You can see them in the Upper West Side a little bit, but, Midtown is still a lot of steakhouses with big Napa Valley, big cabs, big Bordeaux. So yeah, you can see that more and more. Smaller restaurants, farm to table. That's my short answer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, walk me through the visual identity of the brand and what types of things are emphasized on the label, for example. Yes.
The logo, we made it more fun. We decided to be disruptive in the beginning, and then basically we picked a logo that was just a classic logo that could have been the logo of any estate from anywhere in France. So we were disruptive, making different wines from, vitals that no one had heard of. But then the logo was something kind of old school. We brought some younger people to the company to take care of marketing, because I think that if you want to be selling to younger consumer, the first step is to hire someone that is younger at the marketing level, so they understand the generation you want to talk to. And she said from the beginning, she said, "Well, I don't understand a word you're saying. I mean, this is way too complicated. You want to make it accessible. Your motto is to make your wines accessible and, affordable by the wallet and accessible by the palate. But it's too complicated. You have to be a bit more simple. You're Pierre Antonin, you're two people. The logo will be your two faces. Of course, they're cartoon versions of our faces. But at least we know who's behind the brand. And then when you talk on the Instagram, you should be talking about you, about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So you'll be the face of the company. You've decided not to be an estate. You've decided to be a brand. You're a négociant brand mainly. So it has to reflect on the logo, on the graphic chart. It has to be warmer color. You warm people. We Pierre and I were friends to begin with. We met in New York in 2010. We started as friends. We had long conversation for years until we decided to partner up. We have a lot of ideas, but I just had a paella on Sunday at my place. He was there. So the idea is that it has to reflect in the colors you're choosing, in the labels you're making. And that was the first step with the logo change. Then the labels, he has to be a bit disruptive. When you look at the pet nat, you see two big machines covered in wild vine plants, because the machines are useless at Pierre Antonin because there is no treatment in the vineyard, and we make resistant vitals that are partially made of wild vine plants. So the wild vine plants would actually cover useless machines. This is inspired by a Swedish book called The Tale of the Loop. It's a very good book, actually, that talks about kind of dystopic future where machines are useless. So that was the inspiration. Another inspiration was for two other pet nats, Nature's Revenge. We had a graffiti artist, Oscarlette, based in Bushwick. She made two labels, because, she's great. We love the way she paints. And then again, was New York City covered in white vine plants. We thought, it was fun, and we thought it would resonate with what we do, because resistant vitals are immune against vine disease because of their white vine plant DNA. So that's the story behind it. And then the Petit Sauvage line with the 3 foxes. Maybe I can show the label so people have an idea. That's the Petit Sauvage. Resistant varietals used to be called variétés foxées in French, so foxy varietals. So because of the barnyard smell back in the days. So instead of hiding it, we decided to put it on the front label and say, well, this is the new hybrid. Doesn't smell the fox anymore, but we'll just, play along and put it on the front label. Petit Sauvage. And sauvage refers also to wild, and wild is because it's wild vine plants. So the marketing is Pierre, myself, and Margot, and we just come up with ideas, and we like to have something that will make it different on the shelves.
What struck me in looking at your labels is that, for example, the pet nat label, where it's just like a beautiful sort of watercolor, and then it just says the words pet nat. That's it, right? Like, you don't need to explain what the varietal is. You don't need to explain where it came from. You don't need to explain any of these details, because when people see it on the shelf, they see the words pet nat. They see that it's hip, cool design, and it's like very easy to tell what the product is. So I think it does feel like a very disruptive sort of, idea, because you just don't see that many bottles out there that are so simply designed and kind of like tongue in cheek and kind of fun.
And everything is explained on the back label. So it's like people eating cereals in the morning. You have some like me that are not looking at anything, just looking around and trying to get ready for the day. And then you have people that are very interested in their cereal pack and they want to read everything. Well, if you want to know where it's coming from and the process and exactly what's the vital, everything is in the back label. But if you just want to have fun consuming a wine, then the front label is just very, very simple. To your point, it's just pet nat.
So tell me about the activations or marketing campaigns that are working best to drive trial of your products these days.
So a good one, so the press is, of course, something that is very important. So reaching out to the wine enthusiast that made the Petit Sauvage, the wine I just showed you, one of the top 100 last year of their pick. That's very important. James Suckling giving us also some great ratings. That's also very important. So activation is reaching out to the press. Last week, we had Natalie from the Decanter magazine. We had an interview for an hour and a half with her explaining the resistant vitals. So that's very, very important for us, because when you get into a new market like the UK for Decanter, or the one enthusiast is for the US, you need to have some sort of press backup, people that can explain your wines, and, between you and me.
And now, a word from our sponsor. For years, the rule was simple: make it beautiful and it will sell. Those days are behind us. In a market this crowded, looking good is just the baseline. What matters now is clarity, conviction, really knowing what you stand for, even if that pushes some people away. The 2026 New Rules report from the Hilo Agency unpacks how standout beverage brands are building relevance beyond packaging and polish. If you're ready to rethink what brand actually means, go to newrulesbev.com/report to download your copy. And now, back to the show.
Getting 790 points and above always helps in selling wines in many Anglo-Saxon markets. And I say Anglo-Saxon market because he helps also in Australia. He helps in the UK. He helps in Canada. So press activation was really the first one, and every market has a different type of press. So that's something that we pay attention to. The second one is more recent, I would say, is the collabs on the Instagram page. So every time we find people that have values that align with us, basically we just reach out to them and say, hey, I see you're making some streetwear in Paris, and we like what you do, and it's locally made in France, and there's a little leaves of vine plants on what you do. Let's do a collab. So, we don't pay you. Nobody gives anybody money, but we do a little competition, and we can win bottles. We can win some sweatshirts. We can win some espadrilles, flip-flops, for example. We try to be creative in that sense, and we try to find other vendors that have the same audience and the same younger consumers, urban consumers. And that's really key for us. And that's one big activation as well, because we see results. It's way better than running ads on Meta. It's way better than just publishing full page in wine magazine. It's actually more targeted. And even if you get, 200 or 300 likes, you'll make more impact in a precise market than just trying to reach out to everyone and spend on ads. That's something that we don't do anymore.
Yeah. So last year you produced about 350,000 bottles, and this year you're targeting around 400,000 bottles, so about 14% growth. What's driving that growth?
Export markets. To this day, we have 21 markets open. Czech Republic being the last one. Yesterday, I would have said 20. Czech Republic is the 21st. We're still missing some major markets to open. For example, we're talking to Ireland, we're talking to British Columbia, we're talking to Finland. That's also a good market. And we have conversation with many of them. The idea is that once you're in Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and Finland all of a sudden finds you attractive. And that's really the idea. We're getting a lot of articles. We're getting a lot of people interested, a lot of phone calls. And that's, we're trying to use that. Basically, the goal is to open another, 10 markets this year after Millésime Bio and Wine Paris. I think it's something that is completely possible. But, between 10 and a dozen markets should achieve that 14% growth. And then we'll keep on building in the ones that have already been very loyal to us. The US, maybe I'll leave it alone for a little bit until we know about the tariff, because going there with the price increase is probably not the best use of our time. But, still it's the market that is number one. And it's a market that can grow, because, our wines, we essentially sell them on the East Coast and the West Coast. There are many other states that may be in 2027, we'll go to see. Market activations is the second most important after getting a new market on board. Then you have to travel to explain what you do and to make it accessible, because our wines in the beginning are maybe a bit more complicated for wine aficionados, because not everyone know about resistant varietals. It's not something that is widely spread at the moment. I mean, even in the wine business, maybe 1 out of 10 knows about hybrids and resistant varietals. And 10 years ago, when I said peewees, nobody knew about it. So yeah, that's achieving that growth. Will be opening a dozen markets and also going to see some key markets that just got started and need that little push, need that little help in explaining what we do.
Yeah, you mentioned even in the trade, a lot of people don't know much about hybrid varieties. So, what objections do you hear from buyers, and how do you overcome that skepticism?
We get a lot of resistance from wine growers. One very famous in Bordeaux that came to see us and said, resistance will never last. Well, that's a good point. Resistance never lasts. When you have a vaccine, it's good for a certain amount of years. But if it's 10, 20, or 30 years, that's already great. And you're already making a big change, because in 30 years, you're not putting anything in the earth. You're not putting sulfur, you're not putting copper. So that's a big change. And we'll see about the resistance. Maybe it'll last 100 years. Who knows? So that's the first criticism that we're getting. And that is kind of easy to overcome, because people said that in 2020. Well, look at us in 2026. We're still growing and making wines out of the resistant varietals. The question answers itself. That's the big one that we got from more traditional wine grower regions. And now you can see that these hybrid varietals are being planted a bit everywhere. Then from the market is we don't need new varietals. That is as simple as that. We already have problems to sell I don't know, Syrah, Nebbiolo, So why should we bring some new varietals? I mean, what's the point? So that takes a bit of explanation. The French market was more resistant to change than other markets. So now we're doing good, especially in major cities. But for a long time, selling our wines in Lyon, why do we need the Cabernet Cortis, the Sauvignon Gris, and when we have the Syrah and the Grenache? And especially in the market where the trend is going down in a sense that consumption is, lowering down in many, many markets, in most of them. Why do we need new varietals? Well, the answer is you don't need new varietals, but you need a new way of thinking about making wines. And what we bring to the table is different in terms of taste, but also in terms of practice.
Yeah. And what would you say currently is the biggest constraint to your growth? It vineyard supply, production, distribution, tariffs? What are the key constraints?
Tariff is a big one. We had, wholesalers had to raise their price, and I understand that. In the United States, that was a big concern because they asked me if I could lower my price by 10%. And I said, well, we can't. We have payrolls, we have employees, we have to pay the wine growers for the grapes, so we can't do that. So tariff basically is number one. That's one of the major major issue we have to face. Consumption decrease in markets like France, for example, or the United Kingdom is another one. These are not easy to overcome, but there's still space. There's still people that are interested in trying new stuff, and there's some markets where there's still growth, like South Korea or Japan. We're selling a very good amount of wines, and the small segment of natural wines is actually growing within the wine world. It's something you see a bit everywhere. So even though average consumption is decreasing, you see more and more organic wines, and you see more and more natural wine. Now it's a segment that is smaller. If you at some points you get to 30 or 35 countries, you make a big difference in the end.
So, thinking back over the years, what has been the biggest challenge in building this company?
Aligning on values with Pierre in the beginning, what we wanted to achieve. I mean, it's, partnership is a conversation, and it's complicated because Pierre was by himself for a number of years, and I was helping, I was giving, I was funding a little bit. I was helping with bring the wines to the United States, as I explained. But then when you're at 50-50, you have to find compromises, and you have to understand exactly what you want to achieve. It took us about a good year, I would say, to really align. That was a big challenge. And then the other challenge is to remain always on the move. Pierre Antonin stands for research and development, especially in an area where not a lot of people are willing to go. So we keep exploring new varietals. We keep planting new varietals. We have some Johanniter bottles coming out of Italy that have just arrived at the office this morning for tasting next week. The idea is that we have to always be on top of the resistant varietal movement because it changes very fast. And since it's part of our DNA, since it's the key component of our DNA, and since resistant varietals are being created almost every month, we have to stay on top of that because at the moment we don't have much competition, but you'll see, I don't know, maybe Gérard Bertrand or any major player start looking into this and planting some varietals. So we have to be ready, and we have to know exactly what's happening. So that's the big challenge, staying on top of everything that is happening at the production level.
Looking ahead 10 years, what impact do you hope that Pierre and Antonin will have on the broader wine industry?
My idea, my opinion is that resistant varietals will be part of the viticulture, will be part of the solution for the climate change, especially because it's more resilient, it's cost saving, it's water saving, it's energy saving. So I just want to make sure that that resistant movement will still be part of the viticulture, and that in some areas we'll keep growing these varietals because they're really a game changer. And to be honest, with Pierre, we want to grow the company to 1,000 people. We want to keep making bottles, maybe all the way up to 600 to 700,000, and then I think that'll be enough. We don't want to change entirely the world, but we want to give a little impulse and also convince other wine growers that this is working and this is really helping. So we're always happy every time we get a phone call or we get agronomic engineers coming to see us. That's our part. That's actually explaining what we do and how we do it. And we're always happy to help because in 20 years, Pierre would retire, but we want to make sure that what we do and the approach on the viticulture that we have will remain.
Yeah, and I know that it's not only the viticulture, it's also the bottles, for example, working with some of the lightest bottles on the market. So I think from what I understand about the company, it really is living those values every day.
Yes, local winemaking with local winemakers. The lightest bottle in the market, made in France in Albi. If you draw a circle 100 kilometers around the estate, all components are coming from within that circle, and that applies to the bouchon, the corks made in Roussillon forest. That applies to the glass, lightweight glass. That applies to the wax that we put on top. No use of aluminum capsule anymore because France doesn't produce aluminum anymore. And then, of course, recycled cardboard, where we can put, 70 case on the pallet. So then even when you send wines to the US or to Japan or to South Korea, you can put 70 case on the pallet instead of 55. That's a big change also because then it lowers down your carbon footprint. So it's the entire idea from the vineyard all the way to the shelf of the store in the US, for example. You have to think about all this. And, lightweight bottles, you put more cases on the pallet, then it's also better for you're saving money this way. So it's also an economic stake. You take care of the planet and also at the same time you save money, you lower down your footprint, your carbon footprint. So that's a win-win.
Definitely. Well, there's a last question that we like to ask every guest, which is, let's say that a drinks entrepreneur asks you for a book, an online class, an industry group, or a person to follow for inspiration or insight. Who or what would you recommend?
And that's a good one. I was thinking about it today, trying to figure out what could be interesting. I think that Valentin Morel in the Jura is a grower. If I had one person to name, I'll name him. He's very nice. We've actually talked to him a bunch of times. And Valentin Morel is even more brave than Pierre Antonin because Valentin Morel is in Jura, where everything he makes actually is allocated. So all the Pulsar he makes, all the Savagnin, all the Chardonnay, all the Trousseau, he has clients waiting for them. And even though he has everything allocated, he decided to plant Sauvigny that is a resistant varietals, and he decided to make resistant wines. And I think that's really brave, and it gives you an idea on how much he believes into the resistant movement and the hybrid varietals. And he's a small producer, but for us, he's a big inspiration.
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating person to follow that I will definitely look up. And is he on LinkedIn?
Yes, I believe he is. He's on Instagram for sure. That's how we follow him. But yeah, I'm sure he has a LinkedIn. I haven't looked.
All right. Well, we'll put his information in the show notes for people who are interested. So I think that is a great note for us to conclude on. So Antonin, thank you so much for coming on the Business of Drinks.
Thank you very much for having me, Erika. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on Business of Drinks. Subscribe on YouTube at Business of Drinks Podcast, follow us on Spotify, or listen in on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Please tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops.
And help us spread the word. Click those star ratings, give us a review, and share episodes or clips on your socials. It really helps us reach new listeners.
Finally, if there's something that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, tell us. We're at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn.
We love hearing from you and we respond to each and every message. Thanks and see you next time.